all the instructors this year. And we have Chris Martin asked me to go to the equipment with his wife this morning, so he's not here. He'll get stopped in. You'll see him at Lauren Banker Station. So we're gonna have PowerPoint this morning till like 11:30. And then we'll take a break for lunch. We'll go eat lunch, meet back at the academy at the tower, and we'll do our ground school there at the tower. We'll have 4 different stations. We'll rotate through those 4 stations, and then we'll be done. It's been like 4:30. So it was really windy yesterday. So we did it on the outside the first day, and then the entire yesterday because of the rain and the wind. So still about 4:30. We'll get started here with PowerPoint, and then we'll switch out. We'll take little 10-minute breaks. If you need to get up and go to the bathroom, just get up and go. You don't need to wait on the bus.
So we'll get rolling with the PowerPoint, but you can keep filling out your paperwork while we go. A lot of this introduction stuff is, uh-oh. The clicker's not working.
Is it on?
It's on now. Okay. If you want to scan this QR code, this will give you a copy of the PowerPoint. There's a copy of the test on there. It's a whole folder of information. It'll have the list of what's at the anchor station, kitchen packaging. So if you want to take a picture of that or get that scanned, you can have copies of everything. Let me know when you guys are good on that. Everybody good? Okay. So CMC has a textbook that you can buy. It's about $80, but they also have an app that is the full field guide that is pretty much the textbook. It's got pictures of stuff. It's got quick notes. So I think this is a couple of bucks. I don't know if this is it free? Okay.
CMC is free. The DRR app is $10, but it also has videos. So when you learn how to timeouts and build systems, there you go.
But the CNC field guide, if you want to download this, it's a good quick reference. You can use it when you're in the tower. You can use it at your station when you're practicing. If you can't remember something, you can also take your own pictures today when we build stuff. So if you half remember what you're about to do, if you have a photo to reference it, it's helpful. So CNC field guide is that app. So our first couple modules are going to be PPE, incident command, safety, really basic stuff that we use in every fire situation and pretty much every rescue situation. So we'll try to go through some of this stuff pretty quick. So for PPE, we're going to talk about harnesses, the PPE we wear, and how to maintain that equipment. For managing hazards and risks, so we're going to talk about respiratory protection, BSI, PPE and care and maintenance. So we're gonna wear helmets while we're working. Ideally, they're gonna be lightweight. If you only had a fire helmet, that's what you have to wear, it'll work. But with the amount of time we're training on this and the amount of time we spend at scenes, your fire helmet's gonna start hurting your neck eventually. So we want helmets with chin straps. During class, particularly when you get onto the line and you're rappelling, make sure your chin strap is actually buckled. It's not going to help you if you fall from the second floor if it's not buckled. And then all of our PPE is going to be approved by our agencies. We're going to wear gloves, so a good pair of leather gloves. A lot of us have rope-specific gloves. You want something where the palm's pretty protected. When you're rappelling, particularly from high heights, like the crane class we did in Olathe, your hand gets pretty hot and burning if you don't have the right gloves on. We're going to wear boots. We don't want tennis shoes. We want something that supports your ankle. Well, some of this we're going to talk about is ropes. Some of it's confined space because you're getting both certifications. So when we get more into the confined space elements, air monitoring equipment, SCBA, all of the things we would need for a confined space incident, and we'll talk about some hazmat stuff too. So we have different classes of harnesses. Class 1 is like basically a truck belt. Class 2 doesn't have the shoulder straps. we're gonna work with this class 3, all of our harnesses, have the full shoulder strap. That way when you invert, you don't fall out of your harness. So maintenance of our harnesses, we're gonna inspect them after use, make sure that your stitching's not fraying, make sure the webbing doesn't have discoloration, shiny spots. So make sure you're checking your own harness out, particularly before you're about to go out and load the system, but also every time after you wear it. If the webbing is soiled or dirty, we're gonna wash it. We're gonna talk about how you wash and maintain ropes, webbing, harnesses. It's all pretty much the same process for how we maintain ladders and hoses. We're gonna use light detergents, we're gonna rinse, we're not gonna dry them in direct sunlight, so that's all stuff we all know. Other equipment, so we're gonna use only approved cleaners, we're not gonna use bleach on anything. If there's anything that we're lubricating, we're not gonna over lubricate it. We're gonna talk about hardware in a couple of minutes. If we drop any of our hardware, carabiners, racks, pulleys over 3 feet, we have to take them out of service. So if you have a carabiner in your hand and you need to set it down, don't drop it from waist height. Let's take care of the equipment and gently set it on the ground so we don't have to take stuff out of service. All right, in summary, we talked about our PPE and our care. Now we'll talk about safety. So safety is the same safety standards we have for every other rescue. So we're gonna talk about our considerations, our risk-benefit analysis. We'll talk a little bit about respiratory protection, chemical protective clothing, health and safety considerations. We'll also talk about helicopter landing zones. So the types of risks we have that are specific to ropes, so we're obviously working at pretty high heights. We have more fall hazards, structural collapse, hazardous atmospheres, things that we're typically, risks that we're looking for on about any scene that's a large incident. So these are labor intensive. We're not gonna start them until we have the right number of people. The number of people required is gonna depend on what the incident is. We'll talk about size up in a minute. We need to supervise inexperienced members so people aren't touching our stuff and messing it up. And then we're gonna follow 2 in, 2 out rule like we always do. We're gonna communicate well. We're gonna have additional EMS on scene. We're always gonna have a RIT team, so the IC and the safety officer are gonna make sure we have at least a 2-person RIT team. And they're gonna be standing by ready like our RIT team always is. So now we'll talk about the incident safety officer and their duties. So we're following the NFPA standards for the incident safety officer. They're monitoring hazards, they're establishing rehab, they're assigning RIT, reporting hazards, all the things the incident safety officer does at every scene, establishing safety zones, vehicle traffic, monitoring radio traffic. They're gonna communicate to IC if anyone's injured, ensure that everyone gets the appropriate medical treatment. If there is a fatality, they're gonna get the information to our public official, and they're gonna be involved in our post-incident analysis. So helicopter safety, if we did have to bring a helicopter in, we're gonna set up a landing zone for them, so we're gonna find a big open area that doesn't have a lot of debris. We're gonna use typically just traffic cones, but if it's the daytime, we're making a 70 by 70 square. If it's the nighttime, we're making a 100 by 100 square. And then be aware that helicopters don't always take off straight up in a vertical pattern. More helicopter safety. Wear your chin strap on your helmet around helicopters. Don't smoke within 100 feet of them. If you somehow get inside the helicopter, put your seatbelt on. Don't stand in the landing zone. Wear eye protection. Have all your PPE on. I guess a little recap on PPE. Some things we didn't talk about. Safety glasses, earplugs, depending on what scenario we have, is gonna depend on if you need to have earplugs. The rope scene might not always be that loud, but I always keep a set in my pocket for any rescue. Okay, system safety factors. So now we're talking about more of our equipment and our hardware. So we're backing everything up. So if ropes are backing up other ropes. If you use a piece of webbing and you basket it, we're gonna use a second piece of webbing so that that first piece is backed up. Our anchors are gonna be backed up. We'll go through a lot of that in the anchor station today. And then we're always gonna, each rope's belayed by another rope. So we're gonna have a main line and then we're always gonna have a belay. And they're gonna be on fully separate anchors. So we're backing everything up. And then double check your equipment. Have somebody else look at your harness, check the back of it, make sure things aren't twisted up. All right, roles and responsibilities for rescuers. So we're gonna talk about our regulations, our roles and responsibilities, self-preservation. Proper training is necessary, that's why we're in this class. We're gonna use proper techniques, whether we're training, doing a body recovery, evidence search, things might vary based on the circumstances of your incident. We're gonna need to apply basic concepts for search and rescue in incidents. So these are our federal regulations. We're gonna consider state and federal regulations. These ones are more confined space specific, the permits required, excavations, respiratory protection. You have a responsibility to yourself, your team, and your victims in that order. We're gonna wear our PPE like we've talked about several times, and then be prepared for self-rescue and to help out your other rescuers. So our last acronym, we're gonna locate our victim, assess our victim, stabilize our victim, and transport them, the order that we're working in. Rescuers should be trained to operate in specific environments. Assessing victims requires competence. Stabilizing victims requires EMS training, which I think we all have. And then we're gonna relay victim conditions if we're transferring care, just like we do with any patient. So the failure acronym is reasons why rescuers or victims are killed or injured. So failure to understand or underestimate the environment, additional medical implications that we didn't think about, inadequate rescue skills, lack of teamwork, underestimating logistical needs, rescue versus recovery not considered, and our equipment not mastered, all reasons that we can get hurt. So 60% of fatalities in confined spaces specifically are would-be rescuers. It could be a real rescuer or somebody who thinks they're gonna go save their buddy. So we need to consider our own health. We'll talk more about confined space towards the end of the PowerPoint of different ways to ventilate and things like that. These are always team events. Risk versus benefit analysis, we'll talk about in the next couple slides. So understand and be aware of your roles, training proficiency. We're going to talk about NFPA standards, the incident command system, some hazmat information, and accountability systems. So incident management, this is all going to be another recap of things that you already know from any mass incident that we have. So conducting a safe and effective operation is our goal. So in our incident command system, we're managing resources, tactics, providing safety and accountability. We should use these on all emergency incidents, drills and exercises included. And the structure of your system depends on the complexity and the size of your incident, like always. We're going to talk about size up now. So it's used to develop a strategic goal and tactical objectives for your incidents. Your initial size up is going to help determine operational capacity. Your size up, just like any size up, it's a hazard analysis, a risk assessment. So what's the scope? What happened? Do we have witnesses? What's the current state of our victim? So if the current state of our victim is we know that it's going to be a body recovery and they're already dead, we're going to move a lot slower and a lot safer. If we have the capacity to save someone, we're probably going to take more risks. So all of these elements are important in the size up. The availability of resources and capability of resources, if you're gonna need mutual aid or assistance from another department or your hazmat team, we wanna determine that early and get a call out to them early so they have time to get there. This is what we talked about with body recovery versus rescue. So we're gonna risk a lot to save lives, we're gonna risk a moderate amount to save property, and we're not gonna risk anything if property or people are already lost. We can get information about, are there witnesses that can provide details of what happened, or if it is gonna be a rescue or a recovery, are the conditions safe? And then we're gonna do a post-incident analysis. This can be formal or informal. It's a good time to talk about what you did, what you could have done better, what you might do in the future if you get a comparable incident. So in summary, we're gonna use the incident management system. We need a good size up. We're gonna terminate our incident appropriately, and then we're gonna do our post-incident analysis. All right, so now we're gonna, if you haven't been paying attention, start paying attention now, because we're gonna talk about specific road stuff and hardware. So, our hardware originates from climbers and cavers. Most of it's made of steel for the strength. Everything is designed for a 2-person load per NFPA. So carabiners. There's different types of carabiners. There's locking carabiners and there's carabiners that don't lock. What you're gonna work with in class is we have steel carabiners that have the locking nut that's in that photo. So a couple things about them. Like I said, please don't drop them because we have to take them out of service. If you find one that's damaged that isn't locking or the gate is staying open or something, make us aware of that because we're gonna take it out of service. When you lock these down in class, we're gonna turn them till they're tight and then we're gonna turn them a quarter turn back. So finger tight, quarter turn back. When we load these on a system, if you really crank them down, we're gonna have to get pliers to get them off and it just delays everything. So lock them, quarter turn back. Also, always lock them because when we test, it's a critical fail if you leave a carabiner unlocked. So when in doubt, even if you're gonna put something else through that carabiner, if it helps you lock it every single time, you can always unlock it to put something else in there. So the loading of our carabiners. The top picture, the carabiner on the right, that is loaded correctly on the major axis. That's how that carabiner is designed to hold the load at its max strength. So we always want to make sure our load is on the major axis. The left one where it's sideways, that's loading it on the minor axis. We lose a ton of strength and it's dangerous. There's gonna be times in class where, particularly the carabiner that hooks into your harness, if you like sit down and then you have to stand back up to adjust it before you get on the line, that can cross load a lot like that. So always check all your carabiners, make sure they're not cross loaded. They come in steel and aluminum. I think all of the ones we have in class are steel, but they function exactly the same. They just look a little different. There's different types of locks. Ours are all screw lock. 2 choices for gates, locking and unlocking. All of ours in class are going to be locking. So these are the weights. If we load it on the major axis, we have the gate closed and locked, and we're assuming it's a general use. We have a 9,000 pound rating. If it's open, we lose a ton of strength, and if you load it on the minor axis, we lose a ton of strength. Triangle screw links. These allow you to 3-way load. You're not going to see these in class, but you might have them at your own departments. But they're rated up to 9,900 pounds. And then swivels, we do have these in the bags. We don't use them a ton in class, but it allows your system to rotate if the direction of pull needs to be kept in a straight line. And the braking strength on those 9,000. So ascending devices. So you're going to see Gibbs in class. I think most of our departments now, I think CJC said yesterday they don't have Gibbs. But Gibbs and Rescue Centers, they're both ascending devices. We're gonna ask you in class when we're using the gibs, if you take it out of the system, put that pin back in it. So you'll see a gibs later, but there's a pin that goes through there. If you're not using it anymore, don't throw it on the ground with the pin out, because it's just one little cable that keeps that connected. And then we might lose it and not be able to, or someone will step on it and bend it. So just for the purposes of maintaining our equipment, put that pin back in if you're not using it. Some additional ascending devices, pencils. You can use Pru-6 cord the same way you can use a Gibbs, or any of the ascenders. So if you don't have these different types of ascenders, we'll show you how you can put a Pru-6 cord in to function the same. Descending devices or rappel devices, most of these are going to use friction to help us descend or lower. We can use them for belaying, we can use them in lowering systems, you can rappel off of them. One of the main ones you're going to see is our brake bar rack. So this is a 6-bar rack that's rated for 10,000 pounds at the eye. It gives us a lot of control. It keeps the rope from spinning a little bit better than some of our other descending devices. One of the main things Ariel will show you how to lace this later, but this picture on the left, you're gonna lay that bar flat. This top bar is gonna have a little indentation in it. Right now in this picture, the rope's sitting on it. That's where you're gonna start lacing your rack, and then he'll show you how to wrap around and catch all the bars. If you lace it backwards, the bar side that pops off won't be held in by the rope, so you could fall. So we're gonna lace these appropriately, and you'll get your hands on them later today.
Which takes us back to make sure you do a load check on solid ground on any of these devices before you just jump over the edge.
We also have figure eights with ears. We have these in the bags. There will be a couple reasons to use them in class. It's just another variation of a descending device. They're rated for 9,000 pounds. Pulleys. Pulleys help us reduce friction on the rope. We can use them for change of direction. We can use them for mechanical advantage systems. There's double ones, there's single ones that come in different sizes. They're usually rated about 6,000 to 9,000 pounds. You're gonna see edge rollers. So there's some situations where we might make a high point anchor so our rope can go out the window nicely. It's not hitting any edges. Typically in a belay system, if we can avoid using a high point anchor, we want to. We want your belay to stay where it's not hanging from a second anchor in case your main line failed. So we might use some edge rollers where we can just run the rope right over those rollers. It can still go out the window, but there won't be friction against concrete. You can keep your rope protected. We'll tie these off to something so they don't fall out the window on accident, and we'll show you how to do that. We'll also use old sections of 2.5, old sections of 4-inch hose for edge protection in scenarios, but if we're running a rope that's gonna be moving, we're gonna use some type of roller. Anchor straps, we have some of these in the bag. So they're 2-inch webbing straps. They have D-rings that are stitched into them. If you double them up, they're rated to 10,000 pounds. So there's a ton of ways to build anchors that we'll look at, but these are a pretty quick and easy one. They have adjustable ones and just set length ones. So tripod we're gonna use, Kyle's gonna show you it today in class, and we're gonna use it on one of the days in the next couple weeks, but it helps us establish a good high point anchor. We can hang mechanical advantage systems off of it. If you need to go into a tube or a vat or a manhole, they can be really useful. Good in industrial settings, so there's a good amount of uses for that. All right, so know your equipment, how to use it, limitations, and care. Now we'll talk about our software. So our hardware is all our metal stuff. Our software is our rope and our webbing. So we're going to talk about the different types of rope and webbing and also how to maintain it. So primary life safety rope, it's kern mantle rope. It has the inner core, which is the kern, the outer sheath, which is the mantle. There's 2 types of life safety rope. So we have static rope and we have dynamic rope. Static rope has less of an elongation factor when we load it. Dynamic rope stretches more when we load it. Static rope is what we're gonna primarily use. We don't want that much of an elongation factor, particularly when we put 2 people on the load, or 2 people on the line. So safety rope's rated up to 9,000 pounds. It has a 15-to-1 safety factor because we're assuming a 2-person load. So NFPA says we're always assuming a 2-person load 600 pounds, a 1-person load's 300 pounds. So we're typically overestimating our weight so we can plan for the heaviest load possible. So dynamic rope you can use if you're climbing towards or above an anchor point. That's typically the rope they use in rock climbing. And then utility rope is anything that's not life safety rope. We'll use some utility rope in class, like when we tie up the edge rollers. If it's not something that's supporting the life safety load, we can use utility rope for it, and there's a couple ways we'll use it in class. So do's and don'ts in rope. We don't want you to step on the ropes. We don't want you to drag them around sharp edges or on the ground. We're trying to protect our equipment. We're not going to leave things under tension for long periods. We're not going to expose it to high heat. We're not going to store wet rope. We're going to hang it up nicely and let it dry. We're not going to store it in direct sunlight. We're not going to put unknown chemicals on it. We're not going to run nylon over nylon. And then don't use life safety rope for towing vehicles. The do's of ropes. We're going to inspect it after we use it. We're going to keep a rope log. We'll show you a picture of a rope log in a slide or two. We're going to be aware of shock loads. So if we shock load a system, all of that equipment has to go out of service. So if you drop somebody 3 feet, we're not using any of that stuff again. So we need to be aware if there is a shock load on any of our equipment. And then we're going to clean it with a mild cleaner, all our other stuff. So we're going to coil it and store it in a bag. When you're loading a rope bag, you can visually inspect it. You're running it through your hands. If you see wear, discoloration, deformities, let us know. We're not going to store rope in bags with knots on it. So if you have a figure eight on a bight on the end of your rope, don't shove that in the rope bag. We're going to untie it. You can tie a nice stopper knot, like an overhand or a normal figure eight that's nice and loose if you want to, but we're not going to put tight knots and leave them stored like that. And then this is an example of a rope log. So the date you used it, who used it, why you used it, what was the reason, if there was damage, why. So webbing, we can use webbing for a ton of reasons. It's really versatile in ropes. We'll show you a lot of ways to use it. The flat surface area gives it good abrasion resistance. It can be used as a carabiner. There's innumerable uses, so we'll show you a bunch of different ways. Our 2 types of webbing, we have flat and tubular. Our tubular has a little bit higher of a breaking strength. It can be from 1 inch to 3 inches, so the 3 inches is going to be more like your harness or an anchor strap. The 1 inch spiral tubular webbing is what you're going to use or what you're going to see most of the time and what we have in our bags. So we're inspecting these the same way we're inspecting rope. So we're being aware of shock loads, we're visualizing it, we're touching it, we're making sure there's no shiny spots or discoloration. So all the maintenance of webbing is the same as the maintenance of ropes. If it's soiled or dirty, we're going to wash it with a mild detergent, we're going to rinse it. We're always, anytime we get our rope wet or wash it, we're hanging it up nicely to dry. Okay. Now we get to actually put our hands on something. So we're going to talk a couple of things about knot rules, and then we're going to actually tie some of our knots. So the first rule of knots, a knot is not a knot until it's tied off or it has a long enough tail. So in the past, in this class specifically with KCFD, we said put a double safety knot on every single knot you tie except for double fisherman and in the middle of the rope. Now, with the new state regulations, with CMC testing equipment, If you have a tail on a rope that is at least 6 inches long, you do not have to put a double safety on it, with the exception of a clove hitch. We're gonna double safety a clove hitch every time. If you have a piece of webbing with a water knot tied and the tails are at least 3 inches long, you don't need to put that single safety on it anymore. You're not gonna get in trouble if you add safeties. If you wanna add safeties, continue to add safeties. If your department says you need them, keep adding them, but we don't have to all the time anymore. When in doubt, add one if you think you need to. There might be scenarios where, let's say it's the rope attaching to your harness and you don't want that tail flapping around. That's a good reason you could tie a double safety just to get that out of the way. But it's gonna be new for us and everyone because we've been pretty hard on the double safety on everything for many years. And then we're gonna clean up and dress all our knots and make them stronger, easier to check. These are some photos of, if you can't visualize 3 and 6 inches, you can use the length of your hand vertically or this way for ropes and this way for webbing. So knots weaken the strength of our rope. So when we're picking our knots, you could use a lot of different knots for the same purpose, but we're gonna pick the one that has the highest efficiency rating, so the one that loses the least strength when you tie the knot into the rope. So we got a lot of questions yesterday at the anchor station that, could I tie this instead of a figure 8 on a bite? Well, the figure 8 on a bite is typically stronger than some of the other knots they were asking about, so that's why we're using it. It doesn't mean the other one wouldn't work, we just wanna pick the strongest knot possible when we're tying these. So here are some of the breaking strengths, the percentage lost in some of the different knots we're gonna tie. And so you can compare that a figure 8 on a bite loses 20%, but a butterfly loses 25. So we wanna go with the least percentage loss. So yes, a butterfly might function where you need it to, but a figure 8 on a bite is gonna be the stronger knot. All right, so we're gonna hand you out some ropes so we can actually tie some knots. You guys need a break yet, or you wanna start tying? Good? Okay. Early, you wanna demo tie for us? Those are mine, don't give those
That's
away.
Lawrence. I know, that's why I gave it to you.
You don't have any? Yeah, what we learned? Yeah, if your Prusik has a double fisherman in it, untie it because you're gonna tie your own.
You guys know that, Chris? Anybody not have what they need? Needs webbing.
Oh, there's 2 on Okay, so we're gonna go through a bunch of knots. Most of these are testable and are actually gonna be on your test. There's a couple that aren't. But Ariel, Claire, and I all they'll demo while I'm talking a lot, and then we can come around if you need help with them. But the first one's gonna be our figure 8 knot. And then the photo on the left is a figure eight, the photo on the right is just an overhand knot. If you miss a turn on your figure eight, you're gonna end up tying an overhand knot. They're not the same thing, so. We're going to, that's an overhand knot, the top one. The bottom one is a figure eight.
That's an overhand. Do two spins. Here. Spin once.
We're doing a figure eight, not a figure eight on a bike.
Yeah, the different knots, a figure eight.
So do.
We can use this as a stopper knot at the end of the rope. You will tie a figure eight on the bike, and then save that one.
That was it.
No need for a safety, if that's what you're trying to do, or you're just doing the overhand.
Yeah.
All right. We all get a figure eight? Okay, now we're gonna do a figure eight on a bite or a figure eight loop. So most of us, you'll have to try it a few times if you don't tie this a lot, but you can get a measurement where if you pull it across your body at a certain spot, if you have super long arms, it might be here, and that's where you start your bite. You can get the appropriate tail. So once you determine the length you need, just measure that every time. That's where you can start
If
your
you're gonna
bait.
put a safety on it, and you come to this shoulder, that'll be pretty good. If you're not gonna do a safety, just come to this shoulder.
So this is the same process as the eight we just tied, but we're starting with a bite and doing the same wrap. This is one where if your tail is 6 inches or longer, you don't need a safety anymore. If you want a safety, tie it. We want to get these nice and clean. You're gonna tie this a ton, so we're just gonna get better as we go throughout class. But if you can make it with a nice small bite where just all you can fit is a carabiner through it, that's ideal in most scenarios. We're saving a lot of rope that way. So nice and clean, all your ropes are stacked. Nice little bite is what we're aiming for.
Over top. Then.
Everybody happy?
Do a bunch of reps
With
of that.
figuring it out there?
Once you get in that habit, seeing it, it's a little easier.
Okay, so the double safety we've been talking about, you're still gonna need to know how to tie this because we're gonna use it in the double fisherman, we're gonna use it on the clove hitch, you might just wanna use it. So, we're going to, it's not just an overhand knot, it's not a single safety. So you're gonna go over the rope, you're gonna cross it again to make an X, and then you're sliding it through. So it should look like a nice X on one side when you're done.
Just put it back on.
I always get it.
Just your X's are good.
They're on the wrong
your
side, they're on
hairline's
opposite
not right.
sides.
Your-
I always do that, but they never do it.
Each side's correct.
Oh, just that, not the right.
Hold it like this. Take this to the right side. No, this is the wrap it towards your hand. So this tail. Right to the top? I mean, what do you mean right side? Back or over to the left? Which upper side tail's in? Oh, okay. So now you basically tie that
X.
towards your hand. So this is your back. I know this is your back.
You're gonna do it.
Where's that loop?
Looks good.
Now, flip it 180. You want to custom action? He's got another figure out. Flip it 180 before you do that. So start with your first one. Oh, okay.
Make sure you're spread there over to your guys that won't have to do safeties anymore. So, you don't have to go like that. Or it's your choice.
So all you have to do on one side. So start like this.
you
I
tied.
think everybody's good.
We're gonna tie it again in a minute when we do the double fisherman, so. All right, we're gonna do a figure eight bend. A figure eight bend is different than a figure eight follow through. So if you look at this picture, knots that have the word bend in it are knots you're tying to connect two different ropes together. So you're gonna tie your figure eight that we tied at the beginning. And then if you wanna use the other side of your partner's rope, you can, or you can just pick up the other side of your rope and simulate that it's a separate rope. You're gonna follow it through from the opposite side so that both of your tails end up opposite each other. So we're tying a rope together to use it, so we're not tying it around something in this case.
Here's the two different color ropes, might help you visualize a little bit better.
Tie it, break it off, figure eight. First one. Yep. Alright, now, use this, back three down. Follow it.
There, twice,
So it should be next to each other.
yeah, excess is.
Yeah, but going under. That one went over. Yeah, there you go. Oh,
I mean,
Oh, shit, yeah.
So.
it does. No. Just follow through this with the bend.
And they should end up, should be flat, and it should end up in line like that, going opposite direction.
All right, are we good with our figure eight bend? Okay, a double loop figure eight, an MR8 or a Canadian 8, just different names for the same knot. So this one, Ariel and I can demo if you have never seen it before. You're gonna give yourself a lot bigger bite, so if your rope section's pretty small, you're gonna start a lot lower than figure eight on a bite, because you're gonna need more room. So we're going through the same steps to tie a figure eight on a bite. But when we get to the point where we were gonna slide our bite through, we're actually gonna just slide the two rope sections through instead of the bite itself. So you get to here. And then the bite actually goes over the top of all of it. You can pull it tight, we end with two loops.
Oh, I see. Yeah. All right.
That's why you need a larger bite.
This one's a little trickier to clean up than a figure eight on a bite, so do your best, but
Instead of pushing it.
more ropes.
Really bottom.
Push your hand through here, and then grab those two that you have. Now, slide this over here,
All right. Yep.
all the way down.
So over there.
Oh, right on.
So instead of bite through,
Yeah.
take these two ropes and feed them through.
Oh, so it would be like that.
So these two are gonna go through here. And then hang on to those. And then that goes over the top. So these two ropes you're feeding through are gonna go opposite directions.
Right, okay.
Then when you pull these through. So that's why having a bigger bite to start with is helpful, because you have to shove those through. You missed one loop on the figure eight part one on that time. There you go. Those two you're passing through. And then that has to go over the top, so you might have to start a little lower. Way down to the bottom.
Right, for different functions.
So like.
Here, try my room. I can change it to the soft.
Different techniques.
That is correct. When you get this one down, you can start to make the ears on it different lengths. We're gonna show you a way to use that at the anchor station, so once you get good at it, practice making the ears different lengths. Yeah, it's kind of, these aren't super long and they're not bendy, so. Yep. Cool.
Oh, with this one.
Mhm. All right, everybody get the Canadian H?
Shatter, you're fighting yourself.
Anybody else?
Go at the very end of your rope. I mean, these are little sections.
Held on to too many ropes.
Start way down here,
Is
to
that right?
make it easier on yourself. And like she was saying, I mean, in reality,
These
it's finding
down.
these different sizes.
Then I think I held on to.
No, we'll take.
Oh, so it's these.
Let go of this. And then pull this.
When you're doing the anchor, it's gonna be some majors. Okay.
To make them really big, different size loops, you need a longer rope, so, but.
You're wrapping around her.
Yeah, and then it's
Everybody get at
Larger
least
loop.
one?
Well, no, if you just make a loop, and you're not wrapping it around her. Wrap it to your fingers, then you come back around. Your whole hand's not through there.
Stop.
Just your hand.
All right. The figure eight follow through. So we're gonna use this one. The bend we're gonna use when we're tying two ropes together. The follow through we can use around objects. We can use it to replace a carabiner in a lot of scenarios. So you're still gonna start with your normal figure eight on the line. And then pick something to tie it around. You can use the chairs, you can put a chair up on the table, you can use the leg of the table.
Just tie a regular figure eight.
But you're gonna
With
grab
a lot,
whatever
with
object,
a lot of leg left.
and then you're following it through from the top, because it's gonna look like a figure eight on a bike when you're done, but it's gonna
More
be
than
around
that.
whatever object you
Yeah, that
grab.
should be good.
So we're
Now,
lacing it the
with
opposite
this,
direction
it's
we
gonna
did
come
from the
through
bend.
the chair. And remember how like we did that figure eight bend and we just followed this back through, follow it straight through. And your legs should end up coming out the same direction. So then you're just like literally you're following this rope right back through.
Yeah.
So you're under, over that, back through. Now,
Be there. Oh, follow that one.
tighten this down.
And
Looks good.
if you're just as fast as that.
Oh, that one down.
The other way.
Now, follow that. You know, follow it.
And some areas where you're brings me a whole.
Oh, you found the wrong rope.
Back. So now if you were to run out of carabiners, you could use this. Right, so usually we tie figure eight on bite, hook a carabiner to us. If we ran out of carabiners, you could still technically do this.
This one's good too, like,
Does that make sense?
Mhm.
Use
All right.
terminology.
Questions on figure eight follow through? Good? All right, inline figure eight. We'll take a couple minutes on this one, then we can take a break. So this is an option that we can tie into the middle of the rope. It's directional, so we can tie it pointing one direction or the other. Ariel made one. It's easier sometimes if you lay your rope over your table to start. And then you're gonna make a loop. So the first step in that photo is we're gonna make a loop. Our loop is then what we're using to wrap the line. So we take our loop, we wrap it around, we come back up through our bite. Now I made one facing away from me. So we can all go through it. We can send people around to work with everybody.
So if you want to.
No, tell me.
But it is nice in some areas.
So if I want my bite to get face down, I'm gonna make my loop facing up.
You went through the loop again?
And then I'm gonna wrap my rope around. And my bite goes down. If I want my bite to face up, I'm gonna start with my bite facing down.
So it'd be like facing down, so it'd be that.
So it's a directional. So it's
Like weight bearing down? Yeah, okay.
you do it up.
Right.
Yeah, so keep going around like you're about to, and then come up through this one. Well, come through the, oh, I'm sorry, no, you're right. That way. Because then when we end, we want the bite, actually we missed something. So you see how this bite's coming out here, and then there's a rope dividing it? We don't want that, we want these to come out of the same hole, so start from the beginning and look at it. Yeah.
So
So we're gonna actually make a loop, so you're gonna have a cross string.
So which,
And now that's what you're gonna wrap with, that might be what happens, because it was switched there. Yep, keep going, and then, yep,
Under,
that's it. Snug that down.
and like this is.
Now, these are coming out of the same hole that stays in line. That is it.
yeah, okay.
Yeah, that's pretty nice. Really what we're gonna use it for is we're gonna put probably a carabiner in here for some sort of direction, something to do stitches, so this is nice and flat, and this rope can run nice and flat. How you doing? Getting this? Almost getting it. So he had the same issue, you see how your bite right here and this line are divided? We don't want this rope in the middle of those, we want these two guys coming out together.
So you need to be
Start from the
pulling
beginning
down.
again, and let's see.
Yeah, you do point. So like this is going up to the ceiling.
It would be, okay, so from there.
There you go.
Because you just you're not you're loop up. So if you want to switch it and reverse it, loop
Oh, up here.
towards me.
There. You go through right there. That will leave you line.
Across the here, down here.
Yeah, and it's not.
You're looking for these two to end up out of the same hole. If there's a rope in the middle of them, there's something wrong with our wrapping.
There are some times, yeah, there are some times I kind of like.
I'm still doing
We
it.
can then show the start coming out.
Oh,
Like that.
Yeah, because when it's.
Over.
Got it?
Yeah, I know. This is the one that's on the top. If you have to try it, if I want to face it this way, I can start tying this way. So.
I go,
They're saying it is supposed to come up this direction and
I don't really think about it that way. Can you explain that? Yeah.
So you already got it figured out, do it the way you know. If you wanna know, I'll tell you, but right now.
See, I wanna know, but I don't.
And now,
Right now,
direction,
just
now it's.
learn how
Pulling
to
up,
learn how to
yeah.
tie
So
it
you
and
put
learn how
like
to tie
carabiner in that.
both grips.
See,
It's not working all the way up or whatever. I'll show you my way. And you'll pick up on
He's
one.
got it one direction.
That's not
We
me.
do
Working
it
on,
facing
I mean,
down.
I don't know how you tie it. This is how I tie mine.
Yeah, so you're right. So if you, whichever one you use.
One of those.
I appreciate that.
Not one way to do it.
When you just come up to.
Oh, we gotta let that go. Make that look neat. Yep. Just like that. That makes sense? Perfect. I can teach cops.
Yeah. Should get a raise.
I should.
We're not paying you now.
this one you gotta practice, visualize it, do it 20 more times, and then in 2 weeks you'll do that again, because you have to remember.
Have you ever had this basic
Alright, once you're happy with your inline 8, take a 10-minute break.
I've been trying to.
Alright,
Don't get too hard.
A little loop going.
yep.
Grabbing that. Coming around.
So wrap over you in the back. Yeah. I think you were trying to go under. Yeah, sometimes, depending how you wrap it, you can do it either way, but try that wrapping in the opposite direction.
This rope's going this way. So I was tied
Oh, yeah. You guys saw that. So whichever way your loop was, I don't know if that was your loop.
like this.
Yeah, so it actually do go under, because we're gonna encapsulate around and then through, because then our rope should come out in the same hole again.
Okay, that's what I thought.
Haunting you.
Late night? Yes. It would have been like 12:30. I know that walks over.
I don't know about that. A little bit pool side. I haven't had any.
Yeah, you know, I don't really, this is on top. We're calling it.
Yeah.
And I don't care. Were they loading it? Then they probably pulled it. So some stupid questions, especially after midnight.
Few inches.
You know where I was doing.
We'll see how that.
I've heard the name. I just remember. They called her like, man,
When we face access.
I was like, so you've been good for 2 years. And I was like, coming around. You enjoyed this. Go. So,
One facing is on top for start sliding them down. First one on top goes under.
So you guys self-rescue.
once you figure out what works for you, that's what you can find out what. So, like, a couple of steps, one way to cut it. That's why it's. Except like.
Show them how to tie and touch.
You shove, but you got all that. You're just everything. everything in class is now except like 10 steps, we're gonna have that next year. So, we're like, some people, like, that's all, show how to do a code, show how to use the code. And he does it like 4, 5, 6 times. Because everything we told him is different. And then had a brain loss. So he did not use it to the point where Chris was getting panic. Like doing his like jittery.
Yeah.
And so we were just doing it's like you just what? That doesn't make us feel comfortable.
Yeah.
That you just have a brain block. We get it, it takes a while to learn it.
Yeah.
But you learn it.
I'm sure
Yeah.
something that engineers are really thinking about, like, from the outside.
Another one. He's got a baby and he's got a ball.
Another one, he likes his 12 weeks of PPL, so he's like, sure again.
That's what Cam said. We had a
I
baby.
have done that also too. It's kind of neat, because
I'm kidding. I'm good with teachers.
Yep.
Yeah, 3 something the road part. She basically climbed up the rope with her. She was nice, making this.
But slate stitches one that she basically self the same. She can use her. So you can I repelled her the other day. It's actually
Didn't find the head.
It's just kind of
I guess.
there's more heat on the.
At some point,
Through
they both lost it.
the rope, I think, is a
Dog started losing it. So people went the street over with the problem. But they had
That Blake
like
too.
two.
Figure out.
They took Cam, who was almost a year, to put him in their wagon, half the home, the mom like grabbed the wind our dog, had a meltdown at the garage, she parked a wagon over there, like, did all kind of, took care of some. I'll stop by and drop my number off. I'm like, surprised she wants to come back. Lisa, I have some sort
Look at that baby.
But, and they're rolling really good.
What? I took my beer plate seriously.
You look at their first person, they're all self-tended.
I know they're
They can send you delivery nice. Carson.
Yeah.
No, he's working through a function.
Yeah.
So you're just done.
Yeah, I was like, you can talk Oh, you saw that? Oh, that was no, we were rolling out. Make it look like I was
I'm a big fan of your house.
We're trying to add road to it. So, this will be the start of it. This will probably regardless crossover.
Should we just tell them?
We just don't have vertical capability at all. We haven't really, I mean, I've been high off. Trying to go for a high title outside Kansas City. Gotta trust the system.
But that's far and few between, more just be having capability to give them to emergency maintain or, you know, get a second story window, guns on the far side of the house. Can we still do so?
How do you guys handle your tactics? Is it just a standby ambulance?
No, we have two paramedics. We have two in our unit. Well, yeah, one who's been pushing the program isn't there. He's been pushing for it, so he is with us. Which is great, then help push the program. So he's still in because he's the 19th group, so he's naturally already there. So that's awesome. So then we goes to kind of building, so now we've been like a year, and so now it's just trying to get our funding. And so those two questions, then we actually had like two other departments that were in our unit, so they had like so they call out, and can also come, but we have two assigned, we have three full-time teams. One is a condo team, we have a our team, the third team has two guys that come on a daily basis, that's the time that we call out. One thing in a surgeon, do you guys have somebody in mind? Yeah, because he's one that's signed our medical stuff. Someone that yeah, he's come out several times just to watch the show. Bringing that to their going through high liability, high likelihood of bad outcomes. The end goal would be to have certain ready, which is like that's it's unique here, but around the country, they made it powerhouse with Dallas, LA, San Bernardino, they'll have systems on rotating caps. Yeah, you know, I did it.
Yeah, just turn the whole thing back.
Try to explain that to Abby.
Right. And the guy that wrote, that's the guy that wrote basically,
What are we gonna use?
Here's the memo I requested 2 years ago. Here's my transfer. I mean, it's like we've had several.
So right now, we're only doing system and we're like, we're the difference between latitude and longitude and latitude and she'll figure it out. But it's the way it works, case, like until they die in 2 minutes. We'll put, so the guys that are using
All right, is everybody back?
We'll stay so like,
We've got a couple more knots to tie. All right, so we're gonna do a butterfly. This is an alternative you can tie in the middle of the rope, so if that inline 8-year tying is really hard, you can use a butterfly. We're gonna show you 2 ways to tie it. So the first one is the hand wrap. So I go over my hand, I'm right-handed, so I set the rope in my left hand, go over the top. I wrap towards my thumb twice. So the second 2 wraps are crossing over. In my brain, this is the middle rope because I stack these 3 on top nicely. I get some slack out of this middle rope, tuck it up towards your fingers. Against your palm up towards your fingers. To make this pretty, snap this down before you try to pop these out. And then you'll have a nice butterfly. So we're gonna tighten it this way and then we're gonna tighten it that way. Good? Good?
I feel like I did it on accident though. I feel like that was done on accident.
This is my favorite.
Is anyone left-handed? Your entire house left-handed? I do, but I don't do it that way.
Today.
Toward your thumb.
You get one
So the
more
one
day.
toward your thumb.
That's what I did.
That's what we
Your wrist underneath.
Well, that's different.
There is a method where you can flat wrap it.
Maybe it's
I just don't.
it's flat.
No, I did not.
Yeah.
Remember, in my
But if it takes more than 5.
Okay,
Is
that's
that
all.
the-
I'm sorry.
Yes.
Okay.
Why would you use one over the other?
If you cross it, it doesn't matter which hand you do it on.
You're better at one than the other?
Yeah, I mean, there's different benefits of both, but
So the
this
snowman
knob
is
is a non-directional knob.
Okay.
It can be pulled
We're
this
gonna
way,
do that.
it can be pulled this way.
Ariel's gonna show you a nice way to do the double twist snowman. No, you're gonna do it. You
I got a shitty rope.
you can do it better.
Knees,
So,
since I got
I'm gonna
the
show them my way first, and then we'll
PowerPoint,
see
like
what
I
we can do
can
with
see
the
all these
finger.
reviewed.
Alright, so once you got the hand wrap, we're gonna also do the snowman method, or what I call the snowman method. So you're getting 2 twists in your rope. We need to take this bite all the way down to the bottom, and we're coming back through the middle hole. We're gonna snug it down, we're gonna pump the sides out.
2 twists?
2 twists.
You did. Yes.
So the reason we want you to be able to tie this 2 ways, this method is gonna, we can, if we use this twist method, we can get this knot exactly in the middle of the rope where we want it. So if we really need this in a very specific spot,
Twist it,
um,
pull your fingers through here.
we,
Where the anchor?
alright, so if you
have
can
it in
stand
your
up and try
left
to
like
look at
that,
this, we're gonna show you why it matters to be, or why you need to be able to tie it when you pull. Alright, so, let's say I want this right in the middle. If I do my 2 twist method, and I cinch it up and pop the sides out, this is now directly in the middle of our rope. If I try to do the hand wrap method, I'm gonna end up with my butterfly slightly off to each side because you're using slack from one side when you're wrapping. And so if we want it in the middle, being able to do the snowman method helps us out a lot. So, if you can learn to tie it both ways, that is what we're hoping for, but if you're gonna do it anyway, make sure you learn this method. And if it's easier to start not doing it in the air, you can do your double twist on the table if it helps you visualize it better. and hold everything down how you want it. So you can do it flat laying down here.
So I'm bringing it through the middle.
So you're going through the bottom first. So you actually have 3 wraps. So tip 2, there you go. So this guy is going down through the very bottom and then back up through here.
And this gets pulled through here.
Well, you have to go do your double twist again. You're actually lay it flat. Let's do it flat first. So if you do your twist this way. So we're keeping this hole open, that's where it's gonna end. So you go down through this V right here. Then back up through this hole. That's when we can, rope is kind of hard to work with, but that's when we can cinch it down and pop it out. So you're going all the way down through the bottom and then back up through that middle hole.
When you do this, right, either way, you do it this way, in order to like really make this not
And this is coming out through the V.
And up through the middle hole. Yep. There you go. That's it. That's it.
Taking that and then you up.
One more twist.
Oh, yeah. Oh, that. Just follow your head.
Now, don't get caught up on the. We've been talking a lot about keeping the bites super small. Right? So when you actually do this, you want to get it to where we're going to bite. And this one,
Right.
it's tiny.
Okay.
Don't worry about that right now.
Okay.
It's one of those like get the knot and
First
now.
and then, yeah.
It's like 0 and a rifle. You know, like, hey, let's just get it on paper and then we'll figure out where we
With this
can go
butterfly
from
for
there.
now. All right, clove hitch. So we can tie the clove hitch 2 ways. If you have an object where you can just place your clove hitch over the top of it, like a pillar or something, you can do the double twist method. So we're going to twist this one way. We're going to twist this the opposite way. So this one's in the front, this one's in the back. And then we hand them together. Now we have a clove hitch, so we can cinch down. So if you need to do it quick and you have something, you can slide over the top. You can use your water bottle or your can if you have it, or your arm.
On the other
That's the fast way to do it. We can't
Don't
always
ask
do
me how to do
that.
that one.
You can't always place a clove hitch
I
over
found
top
mine
of something.
different. I do a loop and then a
So,
loop.
regardless of, oh, and then you just
Put the front or the back. And then just stack another one right on top.
so it'd be like loop and a loop.
So,
Yeah.
that's a marker, so you can close yourself around. So as long as these loops, one's in the front, one's in the back, it doesn't actually matter which way you do it, like I put this one in the front and this one in the back. When you hand them together, you like crossing them over the front. But
So
the
I have
one
this
in
loop
the front,
and I have this
the
loop.
one where your loops in the front is going to the back side. So when you passed it like that, you made a lunge pitch, which we'll do in a minute. That's what I kind of want you to know.
And you can tell because these two should be next to each other, right?
pull this one up and pull that one down.
Yep, that looks good, and then this one we are going to double sync, you know, so you.
Oh,
Foreign language to you,
You're gonna tie that
Oh.
on.
That's what you're looking for.
All right, once you have the Passover, the top one, we're gonna actually tie around an object, so you can use the armrest of your chair, a chair leg, your partner's arm.
Now,
So, this one,
remember how I showed you
you're crossing it
the
over to make an
lasso?
X.
There you go. And then front to the back,
Once you have your X,
just like that.
it goes up
And then it
through
would
the
be-
top.
And then you would just put it over whatever. If you had something that you didn't have,
And then once that's
you had
done,
access
you'll have a nice
to one
cross
side or
on
the
this
other, you could
side.
slide it down.
And then you would
Then
pull
you take our
tight.
tail, and
So
this
now
is
you're
where we're gonna put our double
this way.
safety. Both hitches
Over
are
the
gonna
top.
get double safety knots just because they can slide
Make an
out.
X.
If you don't give
And then-
yourself a long enough
Yep.
tail for a double safety, it's really easy to feed yourself rope through a closed hitch, so you don't have to untie it and feed some more through.
Tie your safety on this.
Need more tails.
That looks good, you just gotta inch it up, but you only have one hand, so.
And you're just going
There you
to,
got it.
remember that overhand? Where you come,
Yeah.
make an X.
Okay, just kind of looks at it.
Yeah,
Like
just
ropes
make
and-
the extra go inside the seven. For safety.
Make the X and then feed it back through.
I don't know if I looped enough, but
I know, it's really good for the spot you selected.
Pull that up.
pull this one.
Yeah. Yep.
Did I loop enough?
Yes. Now, to see how we have a knot within
When
here.
you practice your clove hitch, practice tying it
As long as
vertically, but
it's
also
not-
on horizontal things.
This has to be
Sometimes it trips people up when you have to do it sideways, so practice on different
We
objects.
take this,
Mhm.
where that knot comes to. Now, if this flow pitch would slide into that knot,
It doesn't matter, it's
that's,
locked.
that's why it's like, if you had it way down here, it's not starts to slide, now you have that much. So if you just eliminate that.
Got it.
Start to click.
Yeah.
I think this stiff rope
Wraps.
was.
Thanks. Three loops.
Good shot. Very good. That's good.
We got, awareness on that initial, we need to see what they actually said.
Alright, finish up your last clove hitch.
Like 6'5", something like that, or.
Alright, so you'll need an object again for the girth hitch. You can do this with webbing that already has a water knot, you can do it with rope, you can do it with your crucix. But it's gonna end up just a nice, easy hitch where this can bite onto something. So wrap over your object and just pull that knot through it.
I just can't see Sunrise Beach being a huge amusement park place. I was thinking about, we go to one in Green Bay that's tiny. So put, yep, just like that.
Get on the girth hitch. Okay, double fisherman, get your crucix cord, that's the primary location we're gonna tie this. This is where your safety knots are gonna come into play. So tie your first safety knot, we're creating a loop. So make sure you don't tie it this way, we're creating a fluid loop. So you're tying one side over the other. Whatever side, or whichever direction you went, we have to tie it exactly the same when we tie our second one. So what I'm gonna do is I'm just gonna flip my whole rope over so I can tie it again with the same hand in the same pattern I just used. And then we end up with our X's on the correct side. You said earlier you had them backwards.
Yeah.
So if you flip that rope around, then you can just tie it with your same hand when you're done, and you pull it apart and then cinch it back together. Your X's should both be next to each other nicely, and the other side should just be 4 flat ropes. If you have 1 X and 2 flat ropes, it means you didn't tie it the same on both sides. You're gonna have to redo one of them.
Okay. And do the other side.
Yeah.
You went backwards to make an X, right?
Go back, yeah, back over the top. And then back through, and then shoot, nope, the other way, towards me. Yep, nope, through both of those loops. There you go. Alright, now, flip your whole rope, there you go. And just tie it. And now, here's the beauty of this.
Still backwards.
You don't have to fight it. You can
Is
do
it
it
backwards or is it just high?
start now.
So backwards.
Miss it. Right next to you. So close.
So as you're dressing,
Go back all the way down, all the way to the
oh,
And then-
so as you're dressing it down, now you can so
Now. Lines on each other.
That locks it.
Same way you just tied together. So,
Where you can tie it backwards. So,
That's what you want. You want 2 X's on one side, flat on the other.
I exaggerate.
Oh, I thought we needed 6 inches. Yeah, so
You just flip it to do it again, same hand.
so one of the things you did, when you're tying it, so you're looping it over, you're still making an X here, like
Oh,
you
yeah.
do on the other side.
Yeah,
See,
yeah.
I think you laid it flat like this and tried to go. So make sure you cross over to actually form an X
Yeah.
before you slide this through. Yeah, and then come over the top and capture this one, and then. And that should give you the nice
a
extra.
lot of people
See if it's
like you ask them to tie it for a second and they're like, oh, okay.
even, so that
And
one
they
looks
flip
like
it
it
and
might
tie
have
it
done
again.
Yeah,
better
yeah.
than this one, but
Sometimes the left brain don't talk to the right.
good? Looks good.
yeah, if you always do it, so for me, I should, like I said, it's exactly what she did.
But if you can start to comprehend, like, okay, I went over this way, and I'm
So
gonna
either
go the
one
way,
does the same thing, so it's fine.
it'll make sense, but to eliminate
The exact same thing on those stuff.
brain power, just a little bit. Tie it that way. That's classified information.
Looks like a good place to just have it sitting out there. So you weren't here when all your buddies were here. So I asked them, is it Nate? I think is that the
Hurley.
lead guy?
I think he's trying to schedule a lot of this, yeah.
Oh, okay. So I just asked, like, hey, what do you guys want from the class, or what are you trying to get out of it? And the consensus was, you're just doing this kind of as a rope familiarization, and then get the certifications, that kind of stuff. But a lot of what we do is really cumbersome, and I don't envision that you guys, we were like way redundant, way like back up.
Yeah.
So I mean, it gives you guys the knots, and it gives you guys the understanding of how things work. But I think when you guys tailor this to what you're really going to do with it, it's going to be a lot more pared down, individual type skills instead of like big groups. Like you're not going to have somebody lowering you down, you're going to be repelling that kind of stuff. So.
I tried to do this like
Get
2
a
years
good
ago.
double fisherman in your cruise six and
Remember
then
I
leave
talked
it
to
there, because we're
3
gonna
guys.
do a cruise six.
Gilchrist maybe. Or maybe Jason Maddox.
Maddox, I told
He's retired now. He was the chief. Yeah, so CJ's their chief now for the rest of the
I
year.
had tried to talk to him, and it was, we need single rope techniques for what we're doing, and that's not what this is. However, it's a lot of the familiarization
Yeah.
stuff is gonna be the unique, or it's
Yeah.
gonna be
So
for
when you
everybody.
guys follow on and take a tactical rope class,
Yeah.
you're not sitting here trying to learn timeouts.
Right,
You already know
correct,
how to time.
correct.
So then you've got that familiarization, and then you guys go to your tag
Yep,
class.
yep,
and,
yep.
yeah,
And that's what I
Yeah.
wanted out of it.
Yeah,
Uh,
that's perfect. I just want to make sure we're giving you guys what
Yes.
you need
I knew,
or a warning.
I knew that it was gonna be different than what we need, and so I'm trying to take this stuff out so then I can take that to the other stuff later on.
Another thing is,
So you're wrapping,
this is 13 millimeter.
you're gonna be
line.
using
You
the
guys are
smaller
probably
diameter
gonna
rope
use
and wrapping it
11
over a
or
larger diameter
9.
rope.
I mean,
when we're
a lot
doing
lighter stuff. for
adjust
the
blankers, when we're doing
stuff.
extended Brucic
But I just
fillet,
want to
so
make sure
can use
you
your other rope
heard that
section,
conversation.
or
That's something I asked on
these
day one.
Brucics
Like,
aren't
what do you
usually
guys
long
need from
enough
us?
to
So it
go
sounds like you're on the
around
same
Oh, yeah.
page.
objects like
Yeah,
this
I'm right
three
there,
times.
yeah.
Okay, perfect.
So we're doing 3 wraps.
Yep.
Once we get our 3 wraps,
Tire pushing back again.
we're gonna just snug it up. Over a boot so I can- So we're doing 3 wraps. If you wrap with your knot, if you keep a little slack, also if you're wrapping with your right hand, it's the same if you're wrapping with your left hand. Keep a little slack on this side, so when you're wrapping and you pull your knot through, you can end with this knot where it's not directly in the middle. Because when we clean this up, this loop is gonna be all the way to the outsides. All of these ropes are gonna be nice and flat. We don't want this where the carabiner connects, so we're gonna scoot this out of the way. If you do wrap it and that ends up right in the middle, you can move this without untying the whole thing. So if you take the 3 ropes on this side and the 3 ropes on this side and you just twist them opposite directions, you can force your double fisherman to where you want it. So if you do tie it where it ends up right in the middle, you can move it, you don't have to fully unwrap it and untie it. There's also a way you can do it. But some people do their wrap and they fully get it nice and pretty. And then they wrap the second one, pull it through. I don't do it this way, obviously, but get it nice and pretty. And then on the 3rd wrap, they do the same thing, so you don't have to clean it up at the end quite as much. Nowadays better at this one, but
That's how I like to do it.
yeah. Then that way, if you cinch it down and then go again,
Off to the side.
you can end with it already cleaned up.
Come over the top.
A lot of things with knots are personal preference. There's a lot of different ways to tie every knot. So whatever works for
Do
you,
that.
just do that every time.
And back through.
We're gonna function with
2,
tandem
3.
Brucics in the tandem Brucic belay. So when I do mine, if I wrap over the top, when I tie my second Brucic, I need to also wrap it over the top. I can't decide that I'm gonna change my mind and underside wrap. So it doesn't matter if you under or over wrap, it just matters that you do them both the same so that they end next to each other and they can't unlock each other on accident. So just be consistent whichever way you decide to do it.
Either side you want. Just do opposite.
You guys good?
This
Yeah.
is bad, because you don't want your character on that knot.
So you do want it offset.
So you, so you're just like riding a motorcycle.
Yeah, I just want that one.
Pull and push. Offset.
And then it would
All right, we're gonna tie a water knot, so grab your
This
webbing.
is not set. You just take it. Now
And
it's set.
have any
So you can
webbing?
run it, and
Guys,
then
do that real quick, Sam.
we use this on like a boat. If something were to fall, it's automatic.
So
As long as you're set.
we're gonna just start with just an overhand knot on one side of your rope.
thing.
No,
I do
it's like-
my overhand knot and I keep it in my left hand since I'm right-handed. So I'm gonna feed with my right.
Learned a lot more about it.
Once you get your water knot, or once you get your overhead knot, we're just following it through similar to when we did our, figure 8 bend. If you keep it nice and flat,
Tight overhand knot.
that makes you not have to clean it up at the end, so make sure webbing's just sitting flat on your other piece of webbing. And then when you tighten it up, everything's nice and flat, you just tie an overhand knot, and then you tie another overhand knot over it. If you have at least 3 inches of tail, you don't need to tie a safety. We're gonna do this a lot with webbing. Here you go. So just a basic overhand knot, just come right back through. And then get that nice and flat so they lay.
So we're using the webbing, we're all set in the same departments as far as webbing, so that's what different needs. And so if you have a longer piece of webbing, you really need a small one. One is just like flat web, you don't see it on those.
Yeah.
Yep.
So that's what it is.
If I go this way,
It doesn't matter.
now I'm right on the back.
Yeah.
Well, you just have to, it's a real small loop, so you didn't.
Oh, yeah.
Like I told her, picture this, your Hot Wheels track, and that's your Hot Wheel. You're just gonna ride this all the way down and around and back to the actual road.
Seth? Thank you.
Jill, I'm not telling you.
Cody, you want some more coffee or just? You guys want me to make another pot or?
That's,
or just wait for
It's
this?
a water knot.
Water knot?
So that is only tied on webbing. So water knot is a webbing knot.
Now we're gonna do the munter hitch. We have lots of variations of how you can tie this, so we'll show you a couple, and you can decide. This is a hitch we're gonna put a carabiner through. We can use it to belay a single person load. So the way I tie it is my same loops as I did a clove hitch, so one in the front, one in the back. For a clove hitch, I'm passing one in front of the other. For a munter hitch, I just hand myself that side. My carabiner goes through here, and then, gonna pull that side. So if I want to belay someone or even myself, this knot will flip over if it's shock loaded. So it can be moving, and then if it gets shock loaded, it flips the knot. So it flips back and forth. So if you tie it right, you should be able to pop over the carabiner like that.
So if she's belaying me as I'm coming here, as I'm being pulled up inside of the structure, so we're gonna go up, right? This is go ahead and get in there like you're actually gonna belay me.
I'm taking you up though.
Yeah. So if she's my rescuer and I'm belaying her, right? So she's down there, I'm belaying, right? We're gonna keep a little bit of slack in here. I'm gonna be going this direction, right? Feeding it through, feeding it through, feeding it through as she's coming up, right? Making sure everything's good. If she falls, right? There you go. Well, this is gonna stop. Alright, and then if you're going down, same thing, that knot just flips over, and then as we're going down, I'm gonna feed slack, and if we have to stop, then you just hang on to it and it stops. So that knot goes one direction or the other, depending on which way you're going, up or down. Is that what you're trying to say? Maybe I missed what you're trying to say.
No, that's right. I was just talking about it flipping. So I showed you the way I tie it. Claire ties it differently, so he's gonna show you how he ties it.
You're always different. What kind of stuff you got? Oh, yeah.
Alright, so for me, I make a loop, and then with this tail, I just go over the top and I grab here, and that's where my carabiner's going. For me, it just makes sense.
I can't even remember what Chris's way was yesterday. He had another way.
So then I have this just clasped here.
Do you do it different?
A little bit.
Yeah.
Same,
like
same.
Kevin's way too.
So for me, I just flip it, flip a loop in it, and then the one that's on the bottom, I just hook with my left thumb, grab the top of the loop, and that's where my carabiner goes. Like you said, you always know you're right when you look at it, you have that saddle around.
You got it.
Same way compared to just
You got it.
grabbing a different.
The way you're naturally doing it. Is what they're doing.
Yeah, whichever way works. Or you can do it like she already said, you know.
Yeah. Oh, no, that's
Yeah, for us, this is where on the loading stuff, this is what I do. Because this is what any rig can do. Let's show you. Control that distance. So we'll bring the information out on the stuff or something like that, or backwards in case it's a regular front.
There you go. Only thing I don't like about that is you got it.
So pick your method, whichever one you like that makes the most sense, and tie it that way, because it all ties to the same knot.
And just stick with it.
Stick with
For
what?
now. In that 6 week, branch out. Get out of your cocoon.
Come around. Literally just feed my weekend.
Yep, that works. Mm-hmm. Perfect. All right, walk away, just do one for Mitch. You're gonna need this handcuff knot for, one of our confined space days. So, I also start this one with opposite facing loops. And then you hand yourself the inside of those loops to your opposite hands, and you pull it.
Cross your hands.
And this will let us, we can put this around people's ankles and
Bring
cinch it
together.
down. And use it to
Normal.
drag people.
And then you're gonna grab these two
Everybody got
the
that
two
one,
hands
right?
hanging down. That's right here.
It's the only one people
I
remember
grab my
from
middle fingers.
Fire Academy, and it's not the one that's.
Yep. Okay. And then we're gonna pull through those two loops.
When you make your loops, you can have
Here.
ones in the front, ones in the back,
Here.
so. It
And
doesn't
then
matter
this one comes to
which
this
one is in the front and the
This
back,
one
they
comes
just have
to
to
the
be
other.
opposite when you start.
Oh.
So,
Cross over.
do we have any issue if we were to deploy that to put around ankles or something? So if you're saying,
So,
This
you
is
really
go to
just
this
wanna
hole.
start
This
it
one
pretty
you
big,
go
and
to this
then
hole.
you can slightly cinch
So
it down,
there it
because,
is.
like, if you're in the tube and you're trying to put it on somebody, you don't wanna have to be loosening it up in there, so make yourself nice big loops, you know, you can fit over like those big huge boots, and then cinch it down.
Grab that.
If you
there.
retie it.
This from the back.
But as far as the knot coming out if you're crawling around, not necessarily, you kind of have to be mindful.
also uses handcuffs.
He's got a couple of options.
Alright. Mariner's knot, we're not gonna tie this, we don't have a mariner here, they can show you how to tie it at the mechanical advantage station later. This is a load releasing hitch. There's different ways to tie this, there's a radium release hitch, you can do it through 6 cord, it's really long, there's a version with webbing. We have pre-stitched mariners, that we're gonna use, so they're designed specifically for this, with places for 3 carabiners, so you can look at the picture, but we're not gonna actually tie this one right now. Alright, daisy chain. So, the key with the daisy chain, we want you to pay attention to in class, because this is how we're gonna store all our ropes. Make yourself a bite, and get your ends as even as possible. We're going to start our daisy chain from the bite end, not the tail's end. Because when we go to untie these, if somebody did it backwards and you tie it the opposite direction, so we're just for class purposes consistently gonna tie it from this end. You're gonna make a loop with both your ropes. So I have a hole. I'm gonna feed my lines through it. Now I have another loop. I'm gonna feed my lines through it again. I have another loop. I'm gonna do that until I run out of rope. When I get to the point where I can't do any more loops, you just feed both tails through, and we can lock it off, and now we can hook these all on a carabiner together. We can store them so they don't get tied to each other.
Most importantly, when we go to deploy it, we can easily deploy it.
So, all you have to do is you just, if you tied it from the correct direction, just take those tails out, and the whole thing can come apart. So that is also very helpful to us. That's why it matters which end you start from, because if I go to deploy it and I pull those tails out, I'm gonna have to unlace it by hand through every loop if it's tied the wrong direction.
After the first one.
Yeah.
So then where do you do
You
it?
actually,
Yeah.
you actually
When
want
we do
to.
that, where you go to, you get it fully deployed except for someone tied an overhand knot to
Really
start.
a
So
fully
just do a
overhand
loop to
knot,
start,
so
not a
it's
knot.
Create the
here,
loop.
and you're coming,
Where that really matters is when you're hanging on the side of the.
and then
Over
that,
there.
yeah, and then you're just carrying that on the rest of the way. So you were there, you just went all the way through with that first one, and did a full overhand knot. It's not a full overhand for that first one.
And then you, at the end, is, okay.
Yeah,
Good?
so, you're real close.
And you can mess with the daisy chain, and you'll daisy chain all your ropes before we're done with PowerPoint for lunch. That's how we can store them, so ties or knots while we finish the PowerPoint as well. You guys need another break, or you wanna keep going? Good. Alright. Last one we're gonna look at, tensionless anchor. This isn't really a knot, it's more of a anchor or a tensionless wrap. We're gonna tie a figure eight on a bight on the end. We're gonna wrap it around an object 4 times, and then we just put a carabiner through the bight and grab the rope. We'll build this at the, anchor station as well. Here, go right here. So, I'm wrapping. Beaner through the bight. Beaner onto the line. You can kind of snug it up. And this gives us a really quick anchor point. It's also really strong because we don't have a ton of sharp bends in the rope, so you can also do more than 4 wraps if you needed to or wanted to. So you could wrap it about as many times as you want, depends how much rope you want to use.
You wrap up or down? Here, when you guys get through this, there's arguments like this all over the place. So up or down, do you wrap up or down? There's lots of ways to do something correctly, and then if you have an opinion, just back it up. So how do you like?
No, I teach it that way, but I've also been shown both ways in different classes, but, the only argument for that way, they say, is if it starts to drop, it's not breaking all your wraps loose, is that carabiner, the weight of it. But like she said, if you know, if it's a super smooth object, you can go 5 wraps. If it's tied correctly, whether it's wrapped up or down, you should never have any tension on that carabiner, it should be slacked. And so you don't lose any of the strength of your rope with the knot. So that 25% knot loss, you have 100% of your rope strength if you have a good, if it's at least 4 times the diameter of the rope.
It's not a bad way to go, like if you're doing a tension diagonal on your swift water or something like that, you're gonna tension it, leave it tension. But if it's gonna be slacked quite a bit and then redone again, to me, it seems like if you wrap down, it doesn't cross over as much. So if you wrap up, it'll work. But if it slacks, then you start having things where you have rope over rope and it doesn't quite cinch down, I suppose.
Yeah, and either way, it'll still be stronger than just a figure eight on bite directly to an anchor, so.
And if you're gonna go around something, it should be at least 4 times the diameter of the rope. So we're just doing that for demonstration purposes.
So you guys will get to build one of those, at the anchor station. Alright, we're gonna talk about anchors. So there's a lot of pictures, we're gonna generally talk about them, but you'll build these, so you'll get hands-on with these today after lunch. So We have really basic anchors, we can just do baskets with webbing, we can do single point anchors just on one object if it's strong enough. We can also do load sharing anchors, where this is a picture with 4 different anchor points, all attaching to the plate. We can do it with 2, we can do it with 3, you can do it with even more than 4 if you want, but we'll look at critical angles in a minute. The more points you're catching, the bigger your widest angle is gonna be, and we'll show you a picture of critical angles and it'll make more sense, but we're going to grab as many points as we need based on what we assume our load to be. A pre-tension tieback, so maybe if you don't trust this first tree, we can tie it back to another object where it's still supporting the first one. So that's an available option for an anchor. Contingency anchors you'll see. So this picture has figure 8s. We could use really any lowering or belaying device right here. The reason we might tie this is if somebody's new to rappelling and they're rappelling and they panic or they get stuck in the middle of the rope for some reason, we can tie a contingency anchor and keep slack up high so that we can then lower them down if something goes wrong. So we'll have this set up when we do our rope ascent in case somebody gets stuck at a certain point and can't get themselves any higher. We'll set it up where we can then lower you to the ground again or lower you to the next floor. So all you're doing is tying off any descending device with enough slack that you could lower the person that's on the line. These are different anchor points. So natural anchors are things like trees and rocks. These can fail, like if the ground's really wet and we're using kind of a small tree, that might be a scenario where we're gonna grab multiple anchor points or we're gonna do the pre-tension tieback. Structural anchor points are gonna be what we're looking for. We want them to be in good condition. We really wanna trust them. So finding structural columns, window frames, things that we trust and we assume that we can put at least a 2-person load on. We can use vehicles as anchors, so we use the rigs as anchors a lot. The one thing to consider with that is we wanna make sure it doesn't end up, somebody decides to move it in the middle of our operation, so you can lock out, tag out if it's like you're using a truck or something, somebody has the keys in their pocket. Or you might have to just leave somebody with a rig to make sure nobody decides to move your fire truck if you're using it. Artificial anchors, this is an option. We're not really gonna work with these in class, but we can use pickets into the ground and do a tension tieback system. We can do nuts and bolts into walls. These are gonna be our least reliable anchors typically, but you might have to use them if we don't have anything structural or we don't have natural options or we don't have vehicle options. So we're gonna anticipate our load. So we're typically starting with one rescue where we're lowering them. We're usually lowering them for a reason. And so we're gonna assume that we're gonna end up with a 2-person load. There might even be scenarios where we send 2 tenders with the Stokes. So we're always assuming the highest load for when we are deciding what anchor points we're using. We're assuming it's gonna be as heavy as it can get. The hauling systems are gonna generate higher loads than lowering systems. So we have the option to, and we send a rescuer down, they pick off a victim. If we can just lower them to the ground, that's gonna be more ideal than creating a hauling system and hauling them back up 4 stories. You can't always do that, but if you have enough rope and you can just have them pick off and continue to lower, that's gonna be more ideal than trying to haul. We need to know how to do both, but. All right, so put all your considerations together and we're gonna build the anchor that can handle the highest expected load. So these are the critical angles I was talking about. So when we're building a load sharing anchor, this one just has pictures of 2 points. Regardless of how many anchor points we selected to share, the 2 widest ropes are gonna be what we consider for our angle. So in this picture, we're assuming a 100-pound load at a 45-degree angle. Each of these 2 anchor points is supporting 54 pounds. So we're pretty well equally sharing our 100-pound load at 45 degrees. When we back it up and create a larger angle at 90 degrees, we're now sharing 71 pounds on each anchor point. So we're actually supporting more than our original load was. And then when we move to 120, we're doubling our load. So each of these anchor points now is each holding 100 pounds. So we're gonna function at 120 and lower. If you can work at 0 or 45, we're trying to aim for that because we want our anchor points to support the lowest amount of the load. Depending on where you're working, you might not have room for that. So under 120 is what we're going for. And so we'll look at that in the anchor station when we catch multiple points. But this is for your load sharing anchors, your main anchors. The primary anchor point of any rope system should be direct in line with the destination if possible. So if we have a really awesome concrete pillar that we trust, we can grab it and go straight, that's what we want to do. We can't always do that, we usually can't do that easily, but we want to grab the strongest thing directly in line if possible. Secondary anchors, so we're backing everything up. So we're gonna have a primary and a secondary anchor. We'll look at that also when we actually do the anchor station, but we wanna make sure if we have catastrophic failure, that the rope's not gonna pendulum and take the slack. So they perform 3 functions: load distributing, non-directional, fail-safe. So anchors are the first link in our rescue system. So when we're sending a person over an edge, if we have to set up a high or low angle rescue, the first thing you have to do is build an anchor. Nobody really can do anything until you build your anchor. So we're gonna show you a bunch of ways to do it, but when you're selecting it, you're considering your load, what your anchor points are, and you're also considering what's the fastest anchor I can build that's strong. Because you can build all sorts of crazy things, but if it's gonna take you 20 minutes to build an anchor, every single other person is standing there waiting for you to build your anchor. So we're thinking about how can I do this as safely as possible and efficiently as possible so that it's built quickly. So some people asked yesterday, like, why would I build a 4-point load sharing? If your single anchor point isn't strong enough for the whole load, or you don't 100% trust it, that's when we can start using multiple points sometimes so that the load's actually being shared instead of 100% of the load being on one object.
We don't have a bomb-proof anchor, then we're gonna have to go for systems. We don't wanna use the system because it's harder and takes more equipment, but if we don't have a bomb-proof, then we have to go with some type of system.
So we're gonna only use the systems when necessary because they're more complicated to build. So load distributing is one of the ones we'll build this afternoon. There's a ton of different ways to build load distributing. So we have a couple of different pictures, some with rope, some with webbing. So this is a W configuration. We have 3 anchor points we grabbed with webbing in this picture. And then this is 1 rope bag. We zigzag it through, we tie it off an 8. We can then cut it again and use the rest of the rope bag. This is a version. The reason we don't typically like this version is there's 7 carabiners involved in this. So you're using a lot of equipment just on the first thing that you're building. So when we're talking about efficiency and how fast can I do it, we're also having to consider how much hardware are we gonna use.
You'll see carabiners is the first thing we run out of in class.
Yep, so if you can save a carabiner, you always wanna do it. This is the same thing, but just with a short section of rope, but still 7 carabiners. We'll build this for you as a demo at the anchor station. This is using a Canadian 8 with 1 small bite, or 1 small loop and 1 really big loop. A few less carabiners. We find this one doesn't distribute as well as the webbing options. So we'll build it for you and show you it, but there's some more efficient ways to do it with webbing. This is just using a single rope, so it's the W with the inline 8 connecting into carabiners. We're still using 6 carabiners in that version. So this is the webbing, one of the webbing versions. So we'll show you how to do it with an X, and we'll show you how to do it with a loop. This is our X version. What happens here and why there's an X there, and why we didn't just wrap the carabiner over the webbing, is if one of these anchor points fails or the carabiner fails, this webbing will grab this carabiner if the load falls. So it's gonna loop around it and catch you. If you just slap your carabiner over the webbing and this fails, you're sliding off the end of that webbing. So this is the X version. There's a version you can do with a loop. You'll get to put your hands on both of those after lunch. So change of direction anchors. We can use these as a high point anchor if we want to run a rope out the window and have it not scraping on the windowsill ledge. We can also use these horizontally if our anchor point's not directly in line with where we want to go. We can build one of these off something else and direct our rope the way we want it. There is also a critical angle factor in change of direction anchors, and it is the exact opposite of what we just talked about with our main anchor point. So on our main anchor point, we want the smallest angle possible. We're stopping at 120. These ones are the exact opposite. We like the bigger angle. We do not want a really narrow, sharp angle because it just puts too much pressure on this anchor point. So a nice flat line, I mean, if it's completely flat, you didn't need a change of direction typically, but we want a nice big angle on these so it's not putting as much pressure on your angle or your anchor point. And now it is Claire's turn.
Y'all need a break?
Nope. All right, cool.
All right, so belay. Everybody know what a belay is? Anybody not know what a belay is? So, our belay is anytime a rescuer is going to go over the edge, kind of be put in danger, it's a backup system. So in case that main line failure or something, this is going to catch us. We're not going to fall to our impending doom. Consists of a second rope attached to a